I should have trusted my gut. That's the thought that circles my mind every time I replay that night. If I had, maybe I wouldn't have set foot in those woods. Wouldn't have pitched my tent under trees that bent in unnatural silence. Wouldn't have woken up to find eyes watching me from the treeline. But I was too stubborn, too arrogant. And by the time I realized I wasn't alone, it was already too late. I'd always been the type who prided myself on roughing it. No campgrounds with clean bathrooms or family-friendly fire pits for me. I wanted isolation, the pure wilderness, the kind of stillness where the only sound is the wind pushing through needles overhead and the snap of your own firewood. That October evening, I parked my truck on the side of a service road that was so overgrown I almost missed it. The map said it cut 5 miles into the forest before it dead-ended. And beyond that, there was nothing but green swaths of trees. No houses, no cabins, no trails. That was exactly what I wanted. I slung my pack over my shoulder, tightened the straps, and started walking. The sun was already bleeding out of the sky, staining it orange, then violet. By the time I'd made camp beside a dry creek bed, night had fallen thick and heavy, and the cold had ceased. The forest was different here. I'd hiked plenty of places where the woods hummed with life. Owls calling, insects buzzing, the occasional rustle of deer. But here, it was too quiet. My boots crunched on brittle leaves, and the sounds seemed to fall flat, as though the air itself swallowed it. I shrugged it off. Isolation was what I'd come for, wasn't it? I set up my tent, gathered enough wood for a fire, and struck a match. Flames curled upward, throwing a halo of light that didn't seem to reach as far as it should have. The trees stood tall and rigid, just beyond the glow, their trunks forming a dark wall. I roasted a hot dog on a stick, washed it down with a swig of cheap whiskey from my flask, and leaned back against a log. The fire popped and hissed, embers snapping upward. That was when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was just branches shifting in the breeze. But the air was still, not a leaf moved. The noise was deliberate, slow, like footsteps pressing down on the dry carpet of leaves just outside the fire's reach. Crunch, pause, crunch. My head snapped toward the dark. Nothing, just trees and the smothering black between them. Probably a deer, I muttered aloud, trying to convince myself. The sound of my own voice helped, though it came out shakier than I'd like. But then it stopped completely, and the silence that followed was worse than the noise itself. I kept my eyes locked on that wall of trees until my vision swam. After a while, the fire burned lower and exhaustion pulled at me. Finally, I told myself I was imagining things. First night jitters. I crawled into the tent, zipped the flap tight, and lay in my sleeping bag. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I heard faint movement outside. Leaves shifting, twigs snapping under weight. At one point, I thought I even heard something breathe. Long, low, almost matching my own. But each time I sat up and listened, there was nothing. At last, I drifted into a shallow, restless sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke again. The fire had burned down to dull coals. My tent was filled with icy darkness, the kind that presses against your skin. What woke me wasn't a sound, it was the feeling. That prickle along the back of your neck when you know you're being watched. My mouth went dry. Slowly, carefully, I sat up and strained my ears. There, something shifted outside. Not random forced noise, a deliberate movement. I reached for the flashlight beside my bag, clicked it on, and pointed it at the tent wall. Shadows warped and stretched against the thin fabric. And then I froze. A silhouette moved across the nylon. A shape taller than any man, broad-shouldered but crooked, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. It paused right outside the tent as if listening. I held my breath, gripping the flashlight so hard my hand ached. Then softly, I heard a voice. "Hey, you awake?" I nearly screamed because the voice wasn't right. It wasn't close enough to be a whisper. But it wasn't distant either. It was flat, hollow. And the worst part, it was my own voice. "Hey, you awake?" it repeated. The intonation wrong, the cadence off like someone practicing human speech and almost getting it. I bit down hard on my tongue to stop myself from answering. The silhouette lingered for a moment longer, then it slowly slid out of sight. I sat there rigid, every muscle screaming until the cold seeped through my clothes. Hours might have passed before exhaustion forced me back down. I didn't sleep. I just lay there listening. At dawn, the forest looked normal. Blue sky through high branches, birds chirping, frost melting into dew. For a moment, I convinced myself I dreamed it. Whiskey-fueled paranoia, nothing more. But when I stepped outside the tent, I saw them. Footprints, not boot prints, not deer tracks. Bare, human. Long, narrow feet pressed deep into the soil, circling my campfire and leading off into the woods. I swallowed hard. Who the hell walks barefoot in the forest at night? I told myself I should pack up and leave, just go. But something made me hesitate. Some stubbornness, some reckless curiosity. Instead, I stayed. The day passed uneventfully. I hiked, gathered more firewood, tried to shake the unease. But the whole time I felt it, the eyes from somewhere in the trees, always just beyond sight, always waiting. That night, when the fire burned low, I heard it again. The crunch of steps, the low, deliberate breathing, and then a voice. This time, not mine, it was my brother's. Except my brother had been dead for 2 years. "Come on, man," it said from the trees, the sound garbled, too deep as though spoken through a broken throat. "It's me. Don't be scared." My chest tightened, every instinct, screaming to run, because I knew then, without a doubt, I wasn't alone in those woods. And whatever was out there wasn't human. I didn't sleep the second night, not a wink. I sat rigid in my tent, clutching the flashlight like a weapon, waiting for the first gray hints of dawn. Every sound made my skin crawl. The groan of shifting wood, the pop of cooling stones, the distant creak of branches that sounded too much like footsteps, and then there was the voice. It came sometime after midnight, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Hey man, it's me," my brother's voice. Clear, familiar, but wrong. I froze, my heart hammering. "You okay in there? You look cold. Come on out." I shut my eyes tight, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. He'd been gone 2 years. 2 years since the accident. And yet, the cadence was spontan, the lazy draw, the way he dragged out certain words. I wanted to answer. God, I wanted to believe it. But every instinct screamed that if I so much as whispered back, I wouldn't live to regret it. The voice circled my tent, slow, patient. I found more wood for the fire. It said, "I'll keep you warm." There was a pause, then laughter. My brother's laugh, except hollow, tiny, like a recording on loop. It stuttered, stopped abruptly, then repeated to loud. I pressed my palms to my ears. Not real. I whispered, not real. But it was right outside. The laughter died, then silence. I didn't breathe until the first smear of dawn lightened the fabric of the tent. I stumbled out at daybreak, my nerves raw, my eyes gritty. I scanned the tree line, expecting, dreading, to see something standing there. Nothing, just endless trunks fading into mist. But when I turned toward the fire pit, I saw it. A stack of logs, freshly cut, neatly piled right beside the blackened stones. My stomach turned to ice. I hadn't gathered them. Something had. I should have left then, should have packed up and driven until the woods were nothing but a smear in my rearview mirror. But fear has a strange way of shackling you. It tells you to stay still, to not draw attention, to wait until you're sure the danger has passed. So I stayed. The third day crawled by. The sun was weak, barely warming the frostbitten ground. I kept busy. Anything to distract myself, boiled water, checked gear, scribbled in my notebook. But always, I felt it, that stare like invisible fingers trailing down my spine. Once I swore I saw movement, a pale shape between the trees, gone when I blinked. Another time I heard my name whispered low and breathy, my own voice. By evening, dread pressed so heavy on me it was hard to breathe. Still, I built the fire higher, ringed it with stones, as though flame alone could ward off what stalked me. I sat with my hatchet in my lap, eyes glued to the dark. It came again when the moon was high. This time it wasn't pretending to be my brother. Help me. The voice was cracked as though forced through broken lungs. It came from just beyond the glow of the fire. Please, I'm hurt. Something shuffled closer. Leaves crunched. Branches snapped. I stood, hatchet raised, light swinging wildly. A figure stepped into the fringe of the firelight. For one wild, desperate second, I thought it really was a man, a hiker, lost, injured. His arms hung at his sides, his posture hunched. But then he moved closer and I saw his skin was too tight, stretched wrong over long limbs. His face was pale, expression slack, eyes wide and glassy like a doll's. His mouth hung open, jaw unhinged too far. Help me. He croaked again, but the words didn't match the movement of his lips. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. Stay away. It tilted its head bird-like. Then it smiled. The smile was too wide, too full of teeth. It stepped forward. I swung the hatchet not to hit it, just to keep it back. The blade whistled through the air. The thing jerked to a stop. It cocked its head again, watching me, studying me. Then, in one swift, unnatural lunge, it retreated back into the trees, swallowed by shadow. The forest was silent again. I collapsed beside the fire, shaking so hard my teeth rattled. The next morning, I found something waiting at the edge of camp. A rabbit, dead, its body flayed open, skin peeled neatly back, organs missing. Its glassy eyes stared at me, and its mouth had been pulled into a grotesque smile, lips sliced to the cheek. It was a gift or a warning. Either way, it was meant for me. By then, my resolve had cracked. I stuffed my gear back into my pack, doused the fire, hand bolted. The forest seemed different in daylight, brighter, safer. I almost believed I'd make it, but the tracks followed me. Everywhere I went, I saw them. Bare human feet pressed into mud, into leaves, always alongside my trail. Sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead, like it was circling, hurting me. By afternoon, I was lost. The map might as well have been blank. Every direction looked the same. Towering pines, endless undergrowth, shadows crawling long as the sun dipped low. That's when I heard it again. My name at first faint, then louder. Hey, the voice called, over here. It sounded exactly like me. I broke into a run. Branches whipped my face. Thorns tore at my clothes. The voice echoed between the trees, mocking, repeating my words from nights before. Not real. Stay away. Not real. Each phrase was my voice thrown back at me, twisted and cruel. Finally, I burst into a small clearing and stopped dead, because there across the space stood me. It was like looking into a broken mirror. Same clothes, same face, but the details were wrong. The shoulders were hunched too far forward, arms hanging slack like they didn't belong to it. The grin split its face ear to ear, teeth to sharp, to many. It didn't move, just watched. I raised the hatchet, hands trembling. What do you want? It tilted its head. Then it spoke. Hey, you awake? The exact words it had used the first night in my voice. Something inside me snapped. I screamed and charged. The thing didn't flinch, but before I reached it, the shadows closed in. It dissolved into the tree iron faster than anything human. Gone, I was alone in the clearing, chest heaving, the echo of my own scream hanging in the air. I didn't stop running after that. Didn't care where I went. Just ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. When I finally collapsed, night was already falling. The cold seeped in fast. I was too exhausted to make a fire, too scared to sleep. I sat in the dark, clutching my hatchet, listening to the forest breathe. Somewhere out there, it was waiting, and I knew it wouldn't stop until I broke. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark. Every second stretched like an hour. Every sound felt sharp enough to cut. My eyes burned from trying to pierce the shadows, but all I could see were endless trees. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It waited. Something was out there, just past the black wall of pines, listening, watching. I clutched the hatchet so hard my knuckles cracked. My breath came shallow, ragged, each inhale too loud in my own ears. I told myself, if I survive until dawn, I'll find my way out. I'll leave everything, just run. But the night wasn't done with me. It started with the snapping of a branch, close to close. My head jerked up, muscles coiled. The sound had come from maybe 10 feet away. Then another snap circling behind me. I turned, flashlight beam sweeping across bark and shadows. Nothing. The beam caught on something pale, a flash of white between two trunks. My chest seized. It was gone when I blinked. Then a whisper, not from one place, from everywhere. Here, come here. Over here. I'm all in different voices. My brothers, my own, strangers, men, women. They overlapped, blended, growing faster, louder, until the trees themselves seemed to speak. Hey man, one voice sparked in my ear, my own voice too close. I spun and swung the hatchet. It meant nothing but air. My scream echoed through the forest, the whispers cut off, and the silence that followed was worse. That was when I realized something chilling. It wasn't just toying with me anymore, it was hurting me. Every sound came from the edge of the dark, pushing me one way. Every glimpse of movement drove me forward. Step by step, I was being guided. Panic surged hot in my chest. I bolted in the opposite direction, crashing through brush, the hatchet still in my hand. The forest wasn't natural anymore. Branches seemed to grab at me. Roots caught my boots, brambles rared my skin. Behind me came the sound of pursuit. Not running, gliding smooth, effortless. I didn't look back. I don't know how long I ran before I stumbled into another clearing. I collapsed to my knees, chest heaving, vision swimming. At first, I thought I'd found salvation. There was a structure, a cabin. It sat crooked in the clearing, its roof sagging, windows dark, old, abandoned. But to me, it was hope. For walls, a door, a barrier between me and the thing in the trees. I scrambled to my feet and rushed inside, the air rare of mildew and rot. Floorboards sagged under my weight, but it was shelter. I slammed the door shut, slid the rusted bolt, and pressed my back to it. Silence. My ears rang with it, my heart pounding against my ribs. I stayed there, clutching the hatchet, staring into the gloom. Dust floated in the flashlight beam, cobwebs draped from beams. Furniture lay broken, not by time, but for the first time in days. I felt safe until I saw the walls, scratches everywhere, deep gouges carved into the wood, long and violent as though made by claws. They covered every surface, jagged lines crisscrossing and words scrolled in frantic, uneven handwriting. Don't look at it. Don't listen. Not a voice. Run. My stomach turned. This wasn't safety. This was a grave. The first thud against the wall nearly stopped my heart. Something hit the cabin from outside hard. The boards rattled, dust raining down, another thud on the other side. Then the roof creaked as the weight pressed down. I held my breath, eyes wide. The whispers came again, louder now, right outside the thin walls. Please help me. So cold. Knocking slow, deliberate from the window frame, from the door, from behind me. I pressed my back to the wall, hatchet raised, my entire body trembling. Then, silence, a pause that stretched so long it almost felt safe. And then, from directly behind the wall at my ear, "Let me in." In my brother's voice, I screamed and stumbled away from the wall. The cabin shuddered, boards groaned, something heavy scraped across the roof. I backed into the corner, my flashlight beam darting wildly. The whispers rose into a cacophony. Every voice I'd heard in the woods overlapping, filling the cabin until it was deafening. My own voice screamed back at me, phrases I'd muttered in fear. Not real, stay away, not real. I clamped my hands over my ears, my vision blurred. My skull felt like it was splitting, and then silence again. The door creaked slowly, painfully slow. The bolt slid back as though unseen hands pushed it. I stumbled forward, hatchet raised, screaming. No, the door stopped, hung half open. Nothing stood there, just the forest, dark and endless. But I knew it was waiting, watching. I didn't last much longer in the cabin. The weight of those scratches on the walls, the words of whoever had come before me, they pressed heavy. I ran again into the forest, into the dark. I don't know where I went. Didn't matter. Every direction was the same, trees and shadows, but the whispers followed, the laughter, and sometimes worse. I'd catch glimpses in the beam of my light. Limbs bending backward, eyes glowing pale, mouths too wide, never fully seen, just enough to remind me it was close, always close. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me down. I collapsed at the base of a pine. Lungs burning, body shaking. That was when I heard it. Not a whisper, not a mimic. Footsteps is slow, heavy, deliberate, coming straight toward me. I aimed the flashlight, hands trembling, and for the first time, I saw it. It stood between the trees, half in shadow, tall to tall. Its limbs were long and crooked, joints bending wrong. Its skin was pale, stretched too thin, veins black beneath. Its face, God, its face shifted like wet clay. One moment my brother's, then mine, then a stranger's, always smiling, always wrong. Its eyes glowed faint and animal-like, reflecting the beam. It didn't move, just watched me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then slowly it lifted its hand. Long crooked fingers pointed at me, and in my own voice, it said, "You can't leave." I should have run the moment I saw it. Instead, I froze. The thing stood there between the pines, taller than any man, its body warped and wrong, limbs too long, joints bending like a spider's. Its face rippled, flickering between mine, my brother's, strangers I didn't know. Always smiling, always wrong. "You can't leave," it said again, my own voice too clear, too hollow. The hatchet shook in my hand. My flashlight beam wavered, catching its pale skin. Its stretched jaw, it took one step closer. The ground seemed to groan beneath it. I stumbled, backwards, slamming into the trunk of a pine. My throat was dry, my breath shallow. Every instinct screamed that running was useless, but staying meant death. So, I did the only thing I could. I fought. With a ragged scream, I swung the hatchet. The blade caught empty air as the creature darted back unnaturally fast, almost liquid in its retreat. Then it laughed, my laugh, shaky, desperate, hollow. The sound echoed from every tree, bouncing around me until I couldn't tell where it stood. I spun, wildly, slashing at shadows, my lungs heaving. "Stop it," I screamed, my voice cracking. The forest answered in perfect unison. Dozens of voices, all mine, all mocking. "Stop it, stop it, stop it." I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, the hatchet slipping from numb fingers. The laughter cut off and the silence swallowed me. When I opened my eyes again, the thing was gone, or so I thought. I staggered to my feet, clutching the hatchet and ran. Branches tore at my skin, ruts tangled my boots. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Somewhere in the distance, I swore I saw light. A faint glow, pale and steady. Salvation. I barreled toward it, lungs screaming, legs on fire. The light grew stronger, warm, golden, like the beam of a lantern. My heart leapt. Maybe a ranger, a hiker, a way out. I burst into a clearing and froze. The lantern sat in the dirt, alone, burning steady. No one held it. The clearing was empty, silent. And when I turned back, the trees had closed behind me, trapped. "Hey," a voice said. I spun. The lantern's light flickered, casting long shadows. And from those shadows, it stepped forward. The Skinwalker. But this time, it didn't wear my face. It wore hers, my mother's, her eyes, her smile, her voice soft and broken. "It's okay, honey. You're safe now." My chest collapsed. My grip faltered. The hatchet nearly slipped. "No," I whispered. She stepped closer, arms outstretched, her face flickering in and out of shape. "Yes," she said. "You're so tired. Just come with me. Rest." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I saw it then, just for a second in the flicker of the lantern. Her eyes black, shining animal. Not her. Never her. I screamed and swung the hatchet with everything left in me. The blade sank deep into flesh. The thing shrieked. Not my mother's voice, not mine, but something raw and inhuman. The sound rattled the trees, shook the air, split my skull. I yanked the hatchet free and swung again and again, screaming with every strike. Its body convulsed, limbs bending, face twisting between 1,000 identities. Blood, if that's what it was, poured black and thick. Finally, it staggered back, shrieking, and dissolved into the shadows. Gone. The lantern winked out, and I was alone. I don't remember how I made it out. The next thing I knew, I was stumbling onto the dirt road where I'd parked my truck days before. My clothes were shredded, my skin torn, my mind a blur. The truck was still there somehow. I drove until the sun rose, until the forest was nothing but a distant smear in the rearview mirror. That was months ago. I haven't gone back. I never will. But some nights when the world is quiet, I hear it. My brother's voice, my own voice. "Hey, you awake?" And I know it's still out there waiting. We spent a lot of weekends at my grandparents' place outside Tyler, Texas, just off a sandy county road north of Highway 69 and not far from Lake Tyler. Their house sat on concrete blocks, up here and being placed with loose skirting you could slide aside to reach the crawl space. It wasn't remote, but once the sun went down, you could hear a truck on 69 long before headlights showed. I was 8 that fall. My brother was about 12. My sister was 5 or 6. Our dog Lexi lived for those trips. She'd pick up her leash with her mouth and stand by the back steps, nails ticking on the kitchen floor as soon as anyone touched her collar. I had read a little bit of folklore by then in library books. I thought it was interesting but separate from real life. I was wrong. The second night after dinner, my grandfather fixed the back screen so it wouldn't slap, and my grandmother took a couple sheets off the clothesline that smelled like sun and soap. The evening sounded normal. Crickets, one barred owl way out, and the low hum from a window unit that cooled the living room. Lexi paced the back steps with the leash in her mouth, tail up. We said we were taking her for a short loop down the service road. My grandmother said, "Don't go past the bend where the moon can't find you." She said it while folding towels like a house rule, not a warning. We nodded, rolled our eyes a little, and went anyway. We cut down the Shell and Sand Drive and turned left onto the rutted road that ran parallel to the highway, screened by tall lobley and sweet gum. My brother carried a flashlight and kept it off to see the stars. I had a rustling bag of dog treats. My sister wore light-up sneakers that blinked red when she walked, which she loved, and I hated because it gave away our position. The air was warm and still. You could smell resin, damp leaves, and a faint iron smell from where my grandfather had sprayed well water earlier in the afternoon. Lexi moved loose and happy, nose down where armadillos had churned up the sand. We were about 20 minutes out when everything went wrong at once. The night sound didn't fade. It went to zero. No crickets, no owl. Even the drone of the AC back at the house felt thinner, like distance had changed. The moonlight turned flat, not dim like a cloud crossed it, just dull, as if a film was laid over our eyes. Lexi stopped so hard the leash tugged my wrist. Her tail dropped, a tremor ran down her sides. She didn't bark or whine. She looked at one point ahead of us and locked there. A deer shape stood just inside the trees before the bend. At first, that's what I thought it was. Then the details landed one by one. One antler bent the wrong way with the tine mashed back toward the skull. The coat didn't fit right, like it had been pulled on and stretched. I could see ribs through hair, not the way a thin deer looks, but like the structure underneath had shifted. The breathing was wrong. It wasn't fast, it was counted. The chest rose and held for a beat, then fell in a timed drop. The smell arrived last, sweet and rotten, the way a bag of meat turns in a closed car on a warm day. Its eyes were a flat yellow, not reflection. The flashlight was still off, the color didn't move with us. My brother said, very low, back up slow. My sister started to cry because Lexi wouldn't look away and wouldn't move. I knew just enough from those books to be stupid. I said the word. I didn't say it loud. I said it clear. You knowed, Lucy. The thing didn't breathe for almost a full second. Then it made a sound that pretended to be a deer and failed. It screeched, lifted to 2 feet with a jerky motion, and a shoulder set under the hide with a hard click. The front limb turned and became an arm that hung too long. Teeth showed in a way that didn't match the head. That was enough. My brother picked up my sister. I scooped Lexi. We ran. It paced us inside the trees and never stepped fully onto the road. It wasn't crashing through branches. The noise was a dry rasp like cloth dragging across bark. When we sprinted, it eased. When we slowed, it closed. It kept us in a straight line toward the open. I realized then it was hurting us, and I realized it without wanting to. When the house roof line came into view, the sound fell back as if it hit a boundary. We hit the back steps and shouldered the screen door so hard the latch bit the jamb. My grandmother was already in the hallway because she felt the pressure change in the house when the outer door opened. My grandfather stood up from his chair without saying anything. My grandmother asked, "What did you see?" I tried to say the word and it stuck in my throat. I wrote it on a narrow steno pad she kept by the phone. She read it, then turned off the porch lights, threw the deadbolt, hooked the little hasp on the crawl hatch at the back steps, and said, "Don't say it out loud." Names carry. The layout of the house mattered that night. Pier and beam, plank floors, a vent register in every room, mismatched skirting around the base, some panels loose. My grandfather set a hammer in the umbrella stand by the front door to fix a nail in the morning. He switched off the television so the house's own sound sat clear. My brother and sister and I shared a room. Lexi lay across the doorway like a living stop, head up, eyes fixed on the floor. The window unit cycled off. The house settled the way old houses do. Small ticks in wood, a fridge motor coming on and off. No one said a word. We listened to each other breathe and tried to make it quiet. A little after 1:27, by the green digits of the clock, we heard the first sound. A soft pass along the skirting, like a flat hand on canvas. Then the faint, careful shuffle of something sliding under the house where the skirting was loose near the hatch. Sound changed when it moved from air to structure. A joist took weight with a low wooden knock. You could track it by the way the floor answered. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. It didn't wander. It worked in a grid like it knew to test and measure. It came under our room. We heard tips of claws tick between floorboards. 1, 2, 3. Then a thin drag, as if learning what made noise and what stayed quiet. The vent register in our room popped once against the floor and dropped back into place. Lexi didn't bark. She showed teeth and held her breath so long she shook. I slid a kitchen knife from under my pillow and held it with both hands. The metal felt cold and wet from my own palms. I didn't have any plan, but I needed something that wasn't my hands. While we heard it under us, another near-identical shifting passed beneath the living room, too fast for one body to move between spots. Either there were two or one could move in a way that didn't match steps. My grandmother stepped into the hall in bare feet and put a hand on the wall. She didn't turn on a light. She just stood and listened. My grandfather gave one plain cough from the living room, a human sound that said people lived here and were awake. The weight under us shifted back to slow scrapes and went still. The worst moment came a few minutes later. The floorboards by my sister's bed flexed a fraction and then stopped. Air against my face changed like pressure on a tiny gap changed the flow. It was the kind of change you feel on your eyelids when someone opens a door on a windy day. Not a breeze, just a difference. It felt like something pressed an eye or nostrils against a crack and drew air from our room. The knife handle clicked against my tooth when I swallowed because my hand shook. My grandfather coughed again. Somewhere under the kitchen, something thin and hard, stick or claw, I couldn't tell, scraped between two boards under the vent, testing the seam. Then nothing. 10 long minutes of nothing. Normal house sounds crept back one by one. The fridge relay, a night truck on 69, a dog barking far off like in a different county. We didn't sleep so much as run out of strength with our eyes open. Morning light made the fear feel stupid while it still sat there. The kitchen smelled like butter and pepper. Nobody wanted to be the first to bring it up. Lexi refused the back steps. She whined and sat down at the threshold. My grandfather got a flat bar and lifted the loose skirting at the hatch. He put a flashlight in and swept the beam along the beams in the sand. The evidence was plain. On one of the big beams, 5 gouges ran together in parallel, deep enough to curl bright slivers of fresh wood. The spacing between lines was wrong for any animal we knew. In the sand, there was a straight line of heel and toe prints that looked human for the first few steps, then lengthened and narrowed. Halfway along, the toes split into pads. By the last 3, the gait moved up onto the toes like a dog. The line angled toward the trees and disappeared where needles were thick. The sweet rot smell still hung in a pocket under there, weaker but real, the way heavier air pulls in a low space. My grandfather measured the distance between the gouges with a tape and wrote it down to 1/2 to 2.6 in between tracks. He took 2 quick Polaroids. He washed his hands twice with dish soap, once with vinegar, and opened the windows to let the house breathe. We told our parents later that week. They smiled it down. They said night makes shadows do strange things and that imagination adds to it. They said coyotes with mange look odd. They said tracks deform in soft sand. We didn't argue because there was no point. My grandmother didn't argue either. She put the Polaroids in the steno page with a written word in an envelope and tucked it into a cookbook on the high shelf. My grandfather replaced the mismatched skirting with tighter panels and screwed the hatch shut with a lock hasp. He sprinkled a line of clean sand around the perimeter for ants, but it would also show any new tracks. He kept the hammer by the front door and never mentioned why. They sold the house within 2 months. The reason was downsizing to be closer to us. Places like that go fast around Tyler. On the last day, my grandmother handed me the green stenopad and said, "If you have to write that word again, write it small." We drove away with the old place shrinking in the rear view. Ordinary trees and flat light ate the view. We told ourselves distance would be enough. Time passed. We moved to a newer neighborhood on the south side of Tyler, closer to schools and stores. We didn't bring up that night. My brother, my sister, and I made a rule without saying it out loud. We didn't speak the name. We called it that night and changed the subject. We kept normal habits that weren't superstition so much as procedure. Shut doors, check latches, bring the dog in at dusk, keep tools where you can reach them in the dark. None of it took effort after a while. It was just how we lived. One humid August evening a few years later, the power flickered after a storm, and the yard went very quiet between waves of cicadas. For 1 second, I caught a faint trace of that sweet rotten smell near the fence. It passed fast, like a car's exhaust drifting and gone. I didn't say anything. I did the same 3 things we always did. I shut the doors, I checked the latches. I called the dog inside and kept the lights low. Nothing followed. The night chorus came back and filled in the spaces. The smell didn't return. The next weekend at my grandmother's new kitchen table, she pulled down the old cookbook and slid the envelope across to me. Inside were the 2 Polaroids of the claw marks and a small list of numbers in my grandfather's careful block letters. She added a note in blue ink. Names carry doors hold. We looked at the photos together. We didn't try to talk each other into or out of anything. We just agreed on what we would do if anything like it knocked at our life again. I don't go back to that old road after dark. I don't tell the story for attention. I tell it because I learned a set of rules that night and they work for me. Don't speak it. Don't invite it. Keep thresholds solid. Keep evidence when you have it. When people ask online if things like this are real, I tell them the truth I have. Some things don't care if you believe them. The gouges were there, the tracks changed shape. The air under the floor moved when it breathed in. We shut the door and it stayed shut. That's the end I wanted, and that's the end we got. I still scan tree lines without thinking. I still notice when a house goes to quiet. It isn't drama, it's just how I live now. Music, I took a summer job at a camp so I wouldn't have to go home. That's the plain truth. I'm 20. My friend Trevor told me Camp Dry Mesa was easy money. Kids, hikes, pond duty, a few campfires. The place sits off an M117 near Grants, New Mexico, where the black rock fields of El Malpais run to the horizon and cold air leaks out of holes in the ground, like a basement you can't seal. I figured I'd watch kids during the day and sleep hard at night. I didn't go there looking for anything strange. What happened felt practical in the moment and ugly afterward. And I am writing it down because I keep seeing advice online that turns simple problems into ghost stories. This wasn't a ghost. It was something that uses our habits against us, and we handled it like you handle a mean animal near a ranch. Trevor and I rolled in 2 days before the campers. We passed the El Malpais Ranger Station, took a quiche spur road to a cattle gate, and met the director, Mare. She had that counselor energy that keeps things moving without raising her voice. She walked us past Basalt Ridge, 3 long bunk houses on cinder blocks, then the South Tank Pond, the archery BM, and the trail to 2 legal viewpoints the camp used. Sandstone bluffs overlook and the lava falls flow. She was precise about boundaries. The Park Service marked what was allowed and what wasn't. Anything below grade without signage was off limits. No arguments. That suited me fine. My cabin assignment was silver badgers, ages 12 to 13. Another first year named Noah got orange coyotes 10 to 11. Our porches faced the same footpath. That first night after the pizza and plastic egg orientation, I lay down on a thin mattress and listened to wood settle. The night had that dry high desert feel. Big empty sky, low shrubs, dust. Around 1 in the morning, a smell moved through the cabin vents. Not strong at first, wet creosote like the air after a sprinkle, then a copper tang under it and something like old cooking fat. I got up, taped a blanket over the window because the overhead security bulb was bouncing glare off the glass and it made me feel like there was a face there, and I went back to bed. I sleep fine in new places. I didn't that night. The second day, we did staff training. A senior counselor named Crispin and his partner Leia gave the standard legend talk they do for kids about an outlaw who hid in the tubes and punish rule breakers. It's theater to keep children from sneaking into lava holes. Everyone laughed. Later, a small group of us hiked sandstone bluffs overlook so we could learn the route to lead. On the way back, Noah pointed at a run of tracks and grit that stopped me cold. You could see goat prints well, definfant, in the same path. They switched to bare feet. The toes pointed the wrong way. The stride didn't change. I wanted a normal explanation, so I said, prank. Noah shrugged. We walked on for a mile from there. Tucked under a flat stone, we found a cloven hoof that looked cut clean and then placed. No blood, just the copper smell again. We didn't bring it back. We didn't tell anyone because new staff already asked enough dumb questions. That night, something tapped under the bunks. Not scratching, not a shuffle, just a steady pop from the crawl space. I checked the vent the next morning and found a string of small goat knuckles tied like beads looped through with a strip of our camp t-shirts. I took it to Mara. She didn't do the smile and distract thing people do with spooky objects. She walked me to the maintenance shed, opened a 5-gallon bucket of salt, dropped the bead stringing inside, and told me to get breakfast. There was a box of orange cattle tags on the shelf, and 3 dead trail cameras without their cards. She didn't explain any of that. She didn't need to. I understood that she'd handled things like this before, and the plan was to keep kids away from holes in the ground and not give whatever it was easy reasons to climb the porch steps. After lunch, Noah and I did a dry run to the rim above Big Skylight. We stayed on the legal side of the monument signs and looked down into a wide shaft that breathed cold air like a fan on low. On the rim, somebody had stacked flat basalt discs into a ring. It looked like the things teenagers build when they smoke and want to leave a mark. Thoughtless art, the center was clean, dustless, like a body lay there often enough to make a print and then was removed. We didn't touch the ring. We agreed that when our kids arrived, they weren't going anywhere near below grade anything, and we'd meet in the mornings to compare notes. The smell had started to show up just before midnight and just before dawn, and it carried through the cabins like a reminder. The monsoon built on day 3. Those quick cells stack over the Zunies and roll off the ridge. Trails change from powder to slick in minutes. Electronics got banned after a kid on staff nearly lost his phone between 2 slabs at lava falls during training, which meant no easy-proof hunting. We did paper head counts and shouted checks. That limits the kind of story I can tell, and I actually think it made us safer. People do dumb things with cameras when they're scared. Without them, you stand still and use your eyes. Food bins by the pond began turning up opened with lids set aside. Raccoons make a mess. This looked careful. At the archery berm, I found my own frayed shoelace tied in a bow around a prickly pear pad. Goat hair threaded through it. I'd cut that lace jagged the day before. The air went coppery again. Nothing you'd notice in a city, but obvious rock where the only other smell is dust and resin. Trevor was part of a group sneaking near a shallow depression that pulled cold air after sundown. I told him to knock it off. He said he was moving contraband so he wouldn't get busted with it in a cabin. Everyone rolls the dice a little before campers show up. He went anyway. Hours later, he fell asleep sitting up on our porch bench. His boots were on the wrong feet. The skin across his knuckles was scraped like he'd spent time moving on hands and feet. He said he fell on the cinder path. I believed the parts I could verify and kept the rest to myself. At dawn, Noah and I walked to the Big Skylight rim. The basalt discs had been restacked wider. In the center lay a silver tarp bundle about the size of a hog-tied person. The fresh pinion poles were lashed underneath it like a stretcher. We didn't open the tarp. We picked it up together, carried it 100 yards to the service road, set it down, and covered it with a spare blanket. Then we found Mare. We wanted an adult present for the unwrapping for a lot of reasons: legal, medical, moral. She brought to senior staff. We cut the tarp. Inside lay a goat carcass, legs folded tight, trussed with new paracord. The head was gone. The throat had been cut clean. No insects. Around the meat, somebody had tied strips of counselor shirts in those same neat bows. I recognized a strip of Trevor's tie-dye. The smell hit hard, copper and old fat. Mara didn't talk about coyotes or kids playing jokes. She took a field notebook from her pocket, wrote down the date, the spot, and our names. She called it a warning placement. Then she told us how we were going to stop giving it chances. The plan wasn't magic, it was ranch logic. We'd salt the ground around the mouths that breath onto our side of the property line. Mark perimeters with stakes and tape so no one crossed at night by accident, and bait a farmouth past junction with butcher offalbot in grants to pull it away from cabins. We'd keep the camper busy topside and leave below areas to the Park Service. If we could get through the next 2 weeks of storms, it would settle. I asked if she wanted me to avoid a word. She said, "Don't say it where rock can carry it." I said it anyway because I needed to feel like a grown man for 5 seconds. Skinwalker. She didn't blink. We moved a 40 pounds bag of salt in a painter's bucket. We laid a tight ring at the rim where cold air came up. It felt stupid, and then it felt like building a fence. Near junction, we set a second ring. While we did that, something stepped out across the lava field. It didn't rush. It was wrong. Thin, long arms, bare legs caked gray with dust, hair matted like it had been burned and came back patchy. It didn't talk, and I'm grateful for that. It angled downwind as if it had done that same arc 1,000 times. When the copper smell thickened, I felt my stomach pull the way it does when you walk into a butcher shop. We didn't run. We kept our shoulders square, backed out slow, and returned to the lights. At midnight, the steps went past the cabins. You could feel the boards catch the weight on the porch posts. It didn't try the stairs. It walked and stopped and walked again the way a person does when he is checking windows for movement. We stood with mag lights pointing at our own feet to keep from blinding the kids inside. And we didn't wave them around or shout challenges. Light made it bank its path, that's all. 15 minutes later, the smell thinned. I looked over at Noah. He nodded. We checked the far line with binoculars from the fence. The bait was gone. Hands, not hooves, had scuffed the salt. A heavy drag mark went away from camp. We'd pulled it where we wanted. At dawn, Leia hadn't slept in her bunk. Kristen said she was with him earlier. That told me nothing. Trevor stayed off to the side like a dog that knows he's in trouble, but hasn't worked out why it matters. Mara said we were closing the loop now. Before heat and lightning drove everybody inside, we did not enter a name tube. That would have gotten us cited by the ranger, and it also would have put us at risk in a way we could end control. On the ranch lease, there was a shallow blowhole, an opening in the basalt the size of a truck hood that reached a side room near junction. Bright daylight hit the floor and the drop was maybe 15 feet. The plan, 2 down, 2 up. Noah and I would descend on a short rope with helmets too. Take a quick look for a person in distress or signs of where they went. Trevor and Kristen would belay and hold positions at the rim. Marla would stay with the radio at the road. Rules were simple. We stayed within the daylight. We didn't step across any salt, and if the smell spiked, we were out. Inside was cold and quiet the way a basement is quiet. The air moved past my ears, steady, not pulsing. On the floor, against the wall lay a pinion pole with a clean notch, a length of paracord in that same bow knot, and a strip of Leia's bandana. Someone had dragged something on a lattice. You could see the rails had scraped basalt dust and left a clean lines that pointed to a crawl no bigger than a kitchen window. We didn't stick our heads in, we didn't even bend at the waist. We hooked the lattice with a loop of rope, kept our boots inside the salt arc we poured and pulled hard. Something on the other side grabbed the far end and tried to hold it. It let go when the lattice rad salt. On the third yank, it slid over the line and crashed into daylight. Leia lay on it, bound at wrists and ankles, gagged with a torn t-shirt strip. Her forearms were gritted like somebody had dragged her across sandpaper. Her eyes kept going to the crawl. We didn't look where she looked. We cut her loose and kept her on our side of the line. We had to make it stop using that route. You can lock windows, but you really sleep only when you change the door. Noah scrambled up the rope and set a comey long with a strap around a block on the rim. I held the belay and refilled the salt. Trevor and Kristen levied a basalt slab that looked like a good fit for the crawl mouth. The smell came up again, heavy and close, a shape pressed just to the edge of light. It stopped at the bright powder like a dog at a hot stove. The windmill was the old kind with the tail fin riddled by 2 decades of holes. The head creaked once for every stray puff of wind. The tank was a dark plate and the frogs were loud. We set our pads on the upwind side of the windbreak, built a small burner flame for coffee, and didn't talk much. I kept thinking about the prints. I kept thinking about the way they crossed that fence line like they understood lines and didn't care. First sign a camp wasn't much. Something moved the grass on the far side of the tank and made no sound. No cricket stopped. No rabbit exploded out. Just grass bent in a smooth path like a hand pressed it. Then the windmill tail clicked and swung and made the same sound twice in a row like something had knocked it. I told myself it was the wind. I tell myself simple stories until I can't anymore. We finished coffee and turned off the stove. No fire. I never do a fire when I'm sleeping light. Fires tell things where you are and how awake you are. We lay back in our bags with our boots on and our headlamps around our necks because I have learned not to waste time reaching. When I closed my eyes, the creak of the mill and the frog noise merged into a single sheet. I drifted fast and then woke hard without a dream in between. It was full dark. The stars were as bright as they get in that part of Utah, and I could make out the silhouette of the ridge behind the blacker line of cottonwoods along the wash. What woke me was my name. I'll write that plain. It was my name, said clean and wrong from the far side of the tank. Not a shout, not a whisper. It was my name in the voice of someone who had learned it by hearing it and wanted to try it on. If you've ever heard your own name from a stranger's mouth, someone who says it like a question when they're not sure they found the right person, that's what it was. It came once, then there was a pause, and then the frogs got too loud again. Like the sound had scared them late. I kept still. I felt Mike's elbow nudge the edge of my pad. He was awake. He didn't sit up either. We waited. The name didn't come again. Instead, the windmill turned one slow notch and the tail flicked like something brushed it. I rolled my head and looked at Mike. He was already looking at me. His eyes were the only part that moved. He mouthed, "You heard it," and I nodded. I eased my hand into my pack. The way you do when you learn to move slow and keep your fingers working before your shoulders. I found the headlamp, then the small flashlight I trust, then the folding knife I keep. Not because I believe it will solve anything, but because the act of having it matters. We didn't turn the lights on, we gave it time. I counted 30 breaths. There was nothing but frogs in the mill, and the frogs were too loud in the way noise gets loud to hide something else. I don't know what rule I broke by clearing my throat, but the moment I did, the frogs cut off like a switch. The silence had shape. A footstep in grass, real measured another. The sound walked along the rim of the tank and stopped opposite us. I could see the water shiver. That's how close it was, I said. We're not lost. Because that was the sentence that came to me. I've used it before, when coyotes circle close and when a stray dog thinks it can test a campsite. It tells a thing you are oriented. It tells a person you're not a mark. The stillness after was a held breath that didn't return to the chest it left from. Then it made a new mistake. It tried my name a second time, a little nearer, and got the vowel wrong. The wrongness is what scared me more than the boldness. Like it was practicing, like it wanted to be better at it for later. Mike said, steady as I've ever heard him, "You should go." The water rippled toward us like something had leaned down to drink, then stopped without the sound of a tongue or a muzzle. The heel of my right hand started to sweat where it pressed on the ground. I know how coyotes move. I know their curiosity and their bluff. This wasn't a coyote. I'm not going to guess at shapes in the dark, but when a thing holds its breath with you and tries your name on twice, you don't have to see it to know you're past the normal edges of the map. We didn't turn our lights on. We lay there with our boots on and waited it out. The frogs began again in pieces. A breeze pushed the vanes and the mill creaked once, twice. You can believe what you like about what moved along the tank's far lip and then away into the grass. I heard steps go light like it didn't want the grass to talk for it. I heard them stop at the cottonwoods and then nothing. When the sky finally thinned, I sat up and my back hurt like I'd been bracing for an hour. Mike sat up at the same time. Neither of us said good morning. We walked the far side of the tank and looked for prints we wanted to find and didn't. Gross doesn't keep a diary. The only mark was a single place where something set weight near the tank's rim and dragged fingernails across algae and iron. I say fingernails because that's what it looked like. To narrow tracks side by side. Shallow, a few inches long, and to clean for a hoo for a paw. We packed in 10 minutes. Coffee didn't come up. He said, "We'll finish the line and be done." I didn't argue. We walked farther east to stay away from the cottonwoods and curved back to the faint fence cut that led toward the ridge. We worked methodically, because work gives your hands something to do while your head unknots itself. Half a mile on, the world decided to get smaller. Out in that open, you see distances the way you see time. Nothing sneaks, but something had hung a strip of bright surveyor's tape on a moss keyed ahead, fresh and clean, snapping just enough to catch a corner of your eye. There hadn't been any tape on our way in. The night before, I know because my mind had been filing waypoints, the way you do when you're deciding whether the truck is close enough to matter. This tape was new, or it had waited for light to show us. Mike walked to it. He didn't touch it. There were hoof marks under the bush, fresh. A small herd had moved through after the breeze picked up. That should have been ordinary. It wasn't because the tape hung at human eye level. And something about the knot was too neat. We followed where it pointed because that's what you do even when you shouldn't. You look at the thing someone meant you to look at because not looking feels like confessing fear. The flagged line let us off our fence cut by 20 yards, then 50. We were still inside of our own caps and tags, but farther than felt smart. The ground here was sandy again, the sort that prints want. We found them without trying. The same wrong hoof heel shapes. Deeper now, like whatever made them had put weight down harder. The stride changed, too. Longer for 3 steps, then short the next 2, like a person trying on different ways to walk. "I'm done with this," Mike said, and that was the first time I heard the old tired edge in him. He bent to pull the tape free, but stopped halfway like something told him not to change the scene. "Leave it," I said. "Let's finish the post we can and go. You've got enough in to show the line. The survey crew can have the rest." He nodded. We backed out the way we came, eyes on our own tag, so we didn't drift. It's funny how small 40 yards feels when you've been called by name in the dark and then led aside by a bright strip of plastic in daylight. The ridge looked closer than before. The wash looked deeper. The land itself had changed its volume without moving. We didn't talk for the next hour. We set caps, we took bearings, we got it done. At the last post we planned to place, Mike stood and wiped his hands on his jeans and looked toward the truck, though it was too far to see. "We can make the road in 20 minutes, he said. "Let's not cut across the wash, stick to the flat." I agreed, and we turned back, and the first thing I saw was a print set squarely over our boot tracks from the morning. Fresh, clean, the same wrong shape on top of ours, like it had stepped where we'd stepped on purpose. It wasn't there when we walked out. It hadn't drifted in by wind. It was new. I looked at Mike to make a joke and felt the joke die in my throat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was already scanning the open. Not frantic, just careful. I realized then he'd seen this before. Maybe not this exact shape, but this feeling. The feeling of a thing that knows where lines are and what names are and how far it is to your truck. The feeling of being studied by something that doesn't need to rush. We didn't run. We didn't even speed up enough to tell the story later like we'd panicked. We walked out steady, the sun clean on our necks, and every H100 red FT. I checked our back trail without turning my head, using the corner of my eye the way I was taught when I was young and wanted to see without giving away that I was looking. I didn't see movement. I didn't want to. And when the cattle guard finally showed and the silver of the truck mirror flashed between the sage, my shoulders dropped an inch on their own. That mile between the last post and the truck, that's where a person decides who they are. You can look back. You can pretend you're curious. Or you can admit what the ground already told you and get in the cab and go. We chose to go. We didn't slam the doors. We didn't crank the engine hard. We just put ourselves in steel and glass and rolled slow until the tow truck met the county road. When the tires touched asphalt, I let out a breath I'd been holding since the frogs cut off. I thought the day had decided its shape. I thought we'd leave it there, file it away in the cabinet where you keep the stories that don't help anyone to repeat. I thought that until we hit the first bend north and the voice that was and a voice came from just outside my window, 40 miles per hour, and said my name a third time, closer. Almost right, like practice was paying off. Hearing your name at highway speed does something simple to you. It strips off the ideas you have about noise and distance and leaves only the fact that something kept pace with a moving truck long enough to speak and then vanished when you looked. I didn't jerk the wheel. I didn't brake. I kept the truck straight because the last thing I wanted was to give whatever was outside a reason to enjoy the wreck I handed it. Mike didn't ask if I heard it. He reached over and thumbed the window switch up as if glass mattered. The sound it made ceiling felt small. We didn't talk until the road bent again and the ridge slid behind a hill. The cab smelled like dust and the warm metal you get when the sun has been on a dashboard since morning. I watched the side mirror for shape and saw only sky and my own shoulder. We passed one of those county turnouts where graders sit sometimes and I took it without announcing. Gravel knocked the undercarriage. I put the truck in park and left the engine running because engines are the one sound that keeps you honest out here. You kill it and you find out fast what else wants to be the loud thing. We should go into Brandon, I said. Get a room, come back in daylight and collect your posts, and walk up to the clerk and say what? He asked. We heard our names near Butler Wash and something paced the truck. You're not wrong. I just don't think putting 4 walls around it changes what it is. We could call the owner, tell him the line's flagged enough. Bill him and be done. We will, he said, but not tonight. I am not driving the highway dark knowing whatever that is can touch us at 40. I didn't like his logic because it pulled us back toward the country we'd just left. But it made the kind of sense a body makes when it picks the thread it knows. I pulled us back out to the blacktop and turned south, toward a windmill we could see from the road, a different one from last night's. The tank sat 50 yards off the shoulder, cottonwood spaced out like tired men at a long fence line. No houses in sight, no porch lights, the kind of place cattle know and people ignore. We parked broadside to the tank so the cab faced it. I set the emergency brake and angled the headlights on low. I don't like bathing myself in light out of habit, but I dislike not seeing more. Mike got out first and I followed. The metal of the door felt hotter than the air. Late heat still held the ground. Lantern? He asked. I've got one in back. I keep a small but decent propane lantern for work sites. Not bright enough to announce from a mile, steady enough to draw a circle you can manage. I set it in the bed, lit it, and turned the valve until the mantles glowed. The truck's bed put it above knee height, light clearing the top of the grass and the tank lip. We didn't climb up to sit with it. We stood on the roadside of the truck, doors open, the cab a fallback if the air turned wrong again. I don't like saying the word just to say it, but I need to say it here so you understand the frame. The word Skinwalker was in my head and I kept it there, on my tongue. I thought about my uncle and the way he never told long stories, only rules. He said, "Don't whistle at night," he said. "Don't answer if a voice in the wrong place uses your name," he said. "Keep something iron on you, because men like to keep objects between themselves and fear." He never said iron mattered to anything else. He said it mattered to us. I slid my knife into my pocket and felt the weight like a promise to stand up and not run. The windmills had turned a finger's worth and clicked. The tank water held a gray skin. Bugs skated. Somewhere down the wash, a nightbird made its flat-toed call. I could see the dust on my hood in the lantern light. Clean little crescent where my fingers had touched earlier. I said, "We're going to sit an hour. If nothing happens, we take 163 to Bluff and sleep there." "Deal," he said. 10 minutes in, the crickets came in layers, not the loud wall from last night. This was the sound a place makes when it's testing whether you belong. I kept my eyes on the strip of dirt between the tank and the grass. It's where anything coming out of the trees would have to cross if it wanted to reach water without showing itself early. I didn't try to see a shape among shapes. That's how people talk themselves into running at the wind. I watched for breaks in the pattern where the grass didn't move with the rest, where a shadow didn't keep the same edge as the lantern's hum changed. What came first was a coyote that was a coyote because it didn't make a coyote-esque decisions. It came out on the far side of the tank, head low, tail even lower, the way desert coyotes come when they've learned people won't share. It stepped into the lantern's edge and stopped. Normal coyotes keep moving, even if they circle. This one set its front feet, then placed each back foot directly where the front had been, not offset. I have seen careful dogs do that on hot pavement. I haven't seen a coyote do it like it was trying out a rule. It stood there a full 20 seconds, looking fixed at the hood ornament, like it had learned busy work to keep still. "Don't move," I said, even though Mike hadn't moved. The animal turned its head slow toward the lantern, then toward us. The eyes didn't flash the way you get with a headlamp. They held the light steady like the animal understood glare and set itself at the right angle. Its ears didn't rotate. It let sound land on it. Then it opened its mouth and made a noise that started like a cough and ended like a man trying not to laugh. I won't dress that up. It made a bad version of a human sound and waited to see what we did. We did nothing. It closed its mouth and took 2 steps along the tank rim, almost slipping on the moss, then corrected mid-slide without water noise. Coyotes slip. This didn't. It moved like a plane correcting itself. It stopped again, aligned with our open doors. It was far enough we'd have to shout to change anything. I didn't shout. "Don't say my name," I told myself in my head, like a man rehearsing in a mirror. I didn't say Mike's either. Whatever was watching us had learned one word, and I wasn't offering it a second. The coyote shape lifted its nose and made a soft sound I have only ever heard when a hunter's dog gets the scent on a path and tells the handler without barking. Then it did something that took the last choice out of this being boredom or a tall story I am telling wrong. It set its right forefoot down in the dust inside the lantern's edge. And the print it left behind wasn't a round pad with claw marks. It was the wrong split and heel shape from our fence line right there on the smooth dirt where we could both see it. I felt the air get smaller. I'm not going to make this mystical. I mean the actual air you bring into your chest. I took a shorter breath to make the same rise. I said clear and soft, "You should go," because I had nothing better. It turned its head left and opened its mouth in a way that read like a smile if you wanted it to read that way. And then it stepped back out of the ring of light and was not visible. And the night swallowed the spot like it had always been empty. We didn't chase shadows with the lantern, we held our ground. 5 minutes passed, maybe 10. I tried not to check my watch because I didn't want to break the line of my attention. When the crickets came back, they did it in a normal way. Separate sources, separate rhythms, no switch thrown. I took that as good news, then reminded myself I had no measure for good. "Let's button up and drive to Bluff," Mike said. His voice wasn't shaking. It had that small scrape in it that shows up when a person has spent too long in a tone they don't use often. He killed the lantern. I shut the doors and locked them without making a show of locking them. We buckled like we were leaving a job site. I put it in drive and rolled for the shoulder. A shape moved parallel to the truck on the cottonwood side. A clean pace just outside the cone of the low beams. I kept the speed slow, then faster, then slow again. The shape held the same window position like it wanted me to keep noticing it. When I sped up to 30, it angled away and vanished. I didn't wait for the voice. When it came anyway, I took it like weather. My name from the dark, closer to correct, still not right. Drag across the last vowel like rolling it around in a mouth that didn't have the right teeth. We hit 163 and took it east. I chose Bluff over Blanding because it was nearer, and because out here you sometimes pick the direction that points you toward a river. Rivers are lines in old country respects. The lights of town show small and honest. Gas station, motel, a metal dinosaur out front of a rock shop. I pulled into the gravel lot behind the trading post because the main street felt too much like a place someone would expect us to choose if they knew we were trying to be around people. The lot was empty except for a road cruise flatbed with a compressor chained down and for cones stacked at the tail. We sat with the engine idling and the doors locked and the radio off. The voice didn't come. Nothing paced the truck. I felt foolish to be in a town lot and still afraid. And then I decided embarrassment is a luxury. Mike leaned his head back and closed his eyes. A minute later, a door opened on the far side of the building, and a man stepped into the square of light with a paper cup and a vest that had silver tape on it. He squinted into the lot and took 2 steps toward us, then stopped at the edge of the light like his boots weren't allowed to cross into the dark. He raised the cup a little like a hello and said, "You boys lost like a man who keeps stock phrases for night work." Mike rolled his window down to in. "You working late, patching a bus pad before school starts tomorrow." He said, "You can park here. Just don't block the flatbed. You look wrung out." "Coyotes," I said, because it was easier to say and not completely false. He made a face that wasn't quite a smile. "Coyotes don't make you sit in a lit lot with the doors locked." I didn't answer. He took a sip and set the cup on the wall behind him and kept his feet in the building's glow like someone had told him once, and he listened. "You hear anything answers to you by name. Don't answer back," he said without looking at us. That's what my grandma said. She wasn't the kind to talk just to fill up space. He didn't say the word I was keeping in my head, and I respected him for that. He picked up his cup again. "If you're leaving, leave. If you're staying, stay in the light. That's free advice. We'll head to the motel," I said. He nodded and didn't wish us a good night. He just watched us go until our headlights swung out on the street and touched the stop sign. We took a room with 2 beds and a carpet that had once been blue. I locked the door and set the chain and put my pack on the floor between my bed and the wall like that meant something. The AC unit made a sound like a train a mile off and then settled. I kept the bathroom light on because there's a difference between fear and superstition, and I wasn't wasting sleep looking at a black square the door couldn't fix. When I lay down, I thought sleep would have to fight for a spot. It didn't. I fell into it hard and rose out of it just as fast at the 13 a.m. because someone knocked on the motel door with my knuckles. Not just a copy of the rhythm a stranger would use. 3 soft, 1 after hotel style. It was the exact way I knock. It takes living with yourself a long time to hear something small and know it belongs to you. I knew the knocks came again. Same timing. Same pressure behind the last tap like I do when I'm not sure anyone heard me. Mike sat up, eyes wide and empty with sleep. He didn't say my name. He didn't even whisper. We stared at the door. I made myself breathe quiet and slow because the body wants to start thrashing when it doesn't have work. The peephole was there if we wanted it. Neither of us stood to use it. The knock stopped. A full minute passed. The AC clicked. Someone outside the door tried my name through the seam near the latch in the wrong, almost right voice. Patient as a person who believes they live here. I waited it out and didn't gift it the sound back. After a while, the whole carpet made no sound, and I knew that meant it had learned more than my knock. It had learned something about the way I wait. We made it to morning. I say that flat because that's how it happened. Night ended? Light showed in the crack under the curtain. A delivery truck did its backup beeps across the street, and I let the sound all the way in like medicine. We showered and didn't talk about leaving the light on. We turned the key in and didn't mention the door chain. We walked out to the truck and didn't find a mark on it that explained any of it. That worked in its own way. Over coffee at the gas station, Mike opened the map app and put his finger along the spine of Combe Ridge. "I have to pick up the posts," he said. "They're the owners. I'm not eating that cost." "We'll do it fast," I said. High Bench Road in and out. He nodded. "We keep elevation, we see more that way." We bought extra water and a can of Fix-A-Flat because fear makes you redundant. I paid for 2 cheap whistles at the counter and threw them away in the trash outside because some habits are for daytime courage, not for nights like last night. We headed back west, with the sun doing its normal honest job of making objects be what they are. It felt like cheating to use that as hope. I used it anyway. On the way out of town, we passed the trading post lot. The flatbed was gone. A clean square of lighter dust showed where it had been. The spot where the man had stood was still in shade. I didn't slow down to see if there were prints. I already knew what the ones I didn't want to see would look like. We climbed to the bench road and followed the top of the ridge south. Truck low, tires touching the edge of old tracks and new. We kept the valley to our left so the wash and the tags were in sight. You could see the windmills in daylight like silver thumbtacks. We would drop down a spur near the last post, load the caps and flags, and climb back out. The plan was good because it didn't ask us to believe the world would behave. It asked us only to do 3 jobs and leave. Before the spur, where the bench narrows and the truck has to choose which rock to run a tire over, the cab filled with that quiet pressure again. The feeling of being in a room that's too small for the air inside it. The radio tried to pick up a station and failed. Gravel popped under the tires. The ridge gave us a full view of our flagged line below. Bright plastic squares where we'd left them, and then one of them moved, not the tape. The cap on the last post lifted clean and set itself down to feet to the right without a hand to do it. I saw it because I was looking right at it. Mike saw it because he said flat there, and then didn't say anything else because there wasn't anything useful after that. We stopped because stopping had become our language. The truck idled. The caps didn't move again. The wind did nothing. The sun did what it always does. And then something tried the passenger door handle once quick, like a friend running up late. The lock held. The handle returned to place. Nothing stood there. I put the truck in park and told myself the truth of my life in that second. I could take my hand off the key and make this longer. Or I could turn it and take us into a plan we still had time to keep. I kept my hand where it was. We had a job left and a line to choose. We took the spur off the bench because that was the job. The track dropped in loose shells where rain had carried rock from the ridge and them quite leaned in with. That flattened look it gets from 100 mirrors brushing it on the way down. I kept the truck in first, let it crawl, and watched the wash open up ahead where our bright caps and tags ran like a dotted line through salt bush and rabbit brush toward the cottonwoods. The plan was simple: park with the nose pointing uphill. Throw the caps and flags in the bed. Don't wander and back out the same way if you stack enough simple plans. You can sometimes pass for smart. We rolled to stop 50 yards from the last cap. The air down off the ridge felt heavier, like a room that hasn't been opened all summer. I set the brake, left the engine running, and we both stepped out with our eyes already on the ground for sign we didn't want. The soil here took prints clean when it wanted to. Right away, I saw our boot tracks from the day before. The shallow triangles a person leaves when they're trying not to sink. Overlaying them, same as before, were the wrong ones. Split up front, hill behind, placed on top of our steps like a lesson. The stride walked past the last post across the open and angled toward the cottonwoods where the wash cut deeper shade. We're not following that, I said. We're not, he agreed. We're packing and leaving. We moved with the kind of care that looks like calm if you film it with no sound. I pulled the caps and coiled the tags, and he carried the bundle while I scanned the edges. The wind was doing that light left to right push that keeps bugs and dust moving, but doesn't carry a smell. I wanted a smell, any smell, coyotes, cows, mud. The absence of it told its own story. At the second to last cap, a strip of new survey tape hung on a tamarisk branch we hadn't flagged. Bright, clean, tied with a neat square knot, the tail ends were cut square with a blade. They didn't have the torn edge the old roll leaves when you're moving. It pointed, not just in the sense that all tape points, but pointed in the way someone marks a path on purpose for eyes like ours. It led toward the cottonwoods and the cool gap where the wash turned. I kept my hands at my sides. Leave it, Mike said before I could say it. We're not here for that. We finished stripping the line back to what we'd promised the owner. Enough to show quarter, nothing to invite attention, and set the last bundle in the bed. I wanted to be wheels up already, but the tape did what bait does even when you've decided not to bite. It made me feel watched for how I refused it. I gave the washmith a long look without moving my head. The shadow in there had the same ordinary shape as a dozen other mouths in a dozen other dry creeks. Nothing stepped out of it. That didn't mean nothing used it. 2 minutes, I said. I want to check the truck's undercarriage. Then we go. 2 minutes, he repeated. Not because he needed the number, but because repeating makes a thing settle. I squatted at the front bumper and looked for lines, leaks, anything that could be pulled loose. And my brain did the unhelpful thing it does when it's busy with tasks. It started listing objects that could stop us from leaving. Valve stem caps, fuel lines, oil pan bolts, and then it stopped listing on its own because I saw a small of river stones stacked under the passenger door like a gift. 5 flat pieces, 3 in a base, 2 on top laid crosswise, each rubbed clean of dust like they'd been wet or handled with care. We hadn't parked here yesterday. Those stones weren't from our tires. They came from the wash, and they hadn't been there when we stepped out. I didn't call Mike over like a kid. I stood slow and pointed with 2 fingers without saying his name. He saw them and didn't swear or make a face. He just looked to the wash again and back to the stones and then to the passenger handle like the 3 made a triangle he could solve by noticing it. I kicked the top to pieces off with the side of my boot. The sound was small. It bothered me that the action felt petty, like a person swatting a fly and pretending the gesture meant more than it did. Enough, he said. Up we go. We climbed in and closed the doors. The locks clicked. The engine read steady. I checked the mirrors and then looked at the washmith one more time because my body wanted to disrespect my own rules. That's when I realized the tape on the tamarisk didn't only point. It lined up with a second strip 50 feet in, just visible between 2 trunks and a third deep in the cottonwoods beyond that, each at the same height, each cut square. A run of markers set for someone who needed help keeping a path at human eye level. A path that didn't exist yesterday. I don't like turning my life into a riddle to be solved by something that is in me. But I also don't like walking away from a sign that says plainly, I can put this where I want. I backed the truck around in a tight arc, nose uphill, and we started to climb the spur. We made 20 yards when the steering went slack for a beat like we'd run from dirt to ice. I eased off the throttle and the tires chewed air, then bit again. I didn't look at Mike. He didn't look at me. In that one soft second, I had the clear thought that something wanted us stopped right here, right where the wash markers lined with the passenger window. We kept momentum and topped the first shelf. The road straightened and gave us another 100 red yards of shallow climb. The ridge above looked plain and close. The cap pressure eased a hair. Then, just where the spur pinched between 2 sandstone shoulders, the right front tire dipped too far in a rut that wasn't there on the way down. I felt the rim touch rock across a thin layer of dirt. A bright metallic scrape under the sound of gravel, and the truck yawed right a fraction. I countered without overcorrecting. The yaw felt like a hand on the fender. Keep it, Mike said. The way you tell a horse to hold a line. We regained the crown with inches to spare. And that, the climb gave us back what physics always gives if you don't panic, bite, roll, bite, roll. On top, the bench road lay in front of us like a plank. I didn't stop until we had the truck lengths of flat and a clear run north. Then I did stop because something you caught and see trying your door handle on a hillside buys itself another try if you re-sloppy. We got out together and walked the right front tire. The sidewall had a new scar, thin, fresh, to clean for a desert rock, which I didn't like because it meant a sharp edge had found us exactly where a person might get out to look down into the wash. We stood there a minute. The ridge wind touched our shirts and then quit. The country below looked calm in that big lying way it has after you've been rattled. Same trees, same tank. The last of caps we left for the owner doing their hot little blinks at the edge of the open. And then I saw movement in the cottonwoods. Not an animal coming out, not a person. One of the tapes farther and lifted and twisted a full turn against the still air, then relaxed like a hand had let go. We're done, I said. We're not solving this. We weren't going to, he said. We drove north on the bench, with both of us watching the mirrors like we could buy a second by catching something forming. The truck rattled the way old trucks do, when they retelling you, they refine as long as you do and ask for a sprint. I kept it at 15, then 20, then back to 15 when the track got chewed. You could see far from up there across the Butler Wash drainage and out to the flats that run to 191. And the distance did what I needed for a mile or two. It made the last hour look small and containable. Then the distance gave us something we couldn't file as far away. 50 yards ahead, where the bench narrowed again around a sandstone knob, someone had built another karen right in the ruts. Same 5 stones, same clean rub on the surfaces, topped with a strip of bright tape tucked under the top rock, so the tails ran down opposite sides like a marker in a book. The truck wasn't going around it without a scratch on the paint. We rolled to stop, nose close. I didn't put it in park right away. I waited for the door handle to jump on its own, for the window voice, for the heavy quiet. Nothing came on the cue I'd set up in my head. The wind blew normal. A fly touched the side mirror and retreated. I shut the truck off because keeping it running felt like I was giving something too much credit. That was stupid. I turned it back on for me. "I'll move it," Mike said. "No," I said, and I heard the hard clip in my own voice. "We both move it. Doors open, no names." We stepped out with the engine idling and the doors swung. The stones weren't heavy. They were just positioned like a person who knows hands knows how to make small work matter. We took the stack apart piece by piece and laid it on the bench edge. I didn't like that. It felt like we were cleaning up after someone who expected us to. It made me feel like I would get a grade when I was done. Back in the cab, I rolled forward, and that's when my eyes caught the print at the base of the knob, half in dust, half on rock. The front was the split I'd already learned, the back a human heel. And then behind that, one step back, the heel was gone, and a round pad width for small ovals for claws had started, like a change had been mid-stride when the ground switched. The two shapes overlapped by a finger's width. I have seen two animals step in the same place a second apart. This wasn't that. This looked like one thing deciding how to be. I didn't point it out. I didn't need both our heads full of the same image. I rolled forward and the truck was happy to go forward. And for a few minutes, we had simple good work. Steer around slick rock, pick the tire lines, keep the valley on the left and the exposure on the right. A raven passed at our hood height and made two wing beats and slid away. I like that bird more than I should have. We cut back toward the highway by a tow track that meets 191 north of the turnoff to the Butler Wash ruin pullouts. Civilization in this part of the map is just the habit of travel. Dust, tire edges, a sign that's been shot twice and replaced once. I could see the long line of blacktop down the slope and the shimmer off it and the little low mirage that hangs over heat in the middle of the day. It looked like the easiest thing in the world to rejoin other people. 200 YD from the cattle guard that would drop us to county maintenance. We passed a rock art panel I'd never noticed. It sat back from the road 10 yard on a vertical face where weather had cleaned desert varnish into a dark canvas. Figures, humans, animals pecked in a lighter shade. I don't pretend to be a scholar. I don't touch panels. I keep my distance and my voice down. But even from the driver's seat, I could see one thing that made my fingers go cold. A fresh pile of small stones stacked under the lowest figure, just like the chirons in our path, and a folded strip of bright tape set under the top piece like a tongue. The panel itself had no new marks I could see. Whoever did this knew enough not to touch what they couldn't put back. They only set their little offering below like they were leaving a note for anyone who knew where to look. "Keep going," Mike said flat. "Don't stop. Don't even slow down. Don't give it a chance to put you on your feet." I kept speed steady and let the cattle guard knock the tires and watched for any grab at the doors just because my brain wanted to rehearse it. Nothing tried us. The highway showed and ran straight north and south the way a promise runs. Plain, unambiguous, full of work it can and can't do for you. We turned south because Bluff was closer and because we still had to put bodies in a place with walls before sundown that we controlled. The day had turned hard bright, the kind that gives you sharp edges on every object, but not a lot of mercy. We didn't talk until the speedometer settled and the engine note evened out. "You see the panel?" I asked finally. "I saw the stones," he said. That was enough. We made town and ate at the counter of the place that does burgers and green chili and pie. The waitress was the kind of person who knows when to leave a man and his food alone and when to ask if he wants more water. We ate like men, just back from a job that paid but didn't feel like pay. Neither of us ordered pie. The waitress asked if we wanted a box. We said no in the same non-voice. "What now?" I asked, folding the bill into the check sleeve. "I call the owner and tell him the line is marked enough to find," he said. I tell him we staged caps for his survey crew at the top. He stopped because we hadn't staged anything. We'd hauled it all out. I tell him the truth that matters. The rest he can hear if he wants to or not at all. "And after that, we leave," he said. "We don't pick the ridge again. We don't test what it can or can't do 2 days in a row. We leave." It was the best plan on the table and the only one I could stand behind without lying. We paid, stepped into the Bright, and made for the motel to grab the gear we'd left. The room smelled like cleaners and night sweat. The door chain felt soft in my hand. No new marks in the carpet near the threshold. No taps on the door to say we'd been graded for choosing sunlight. We were 20 minutes from pointing the hood at the San Juan and then the long ribbon of 60. When the day made one last adjustment, the phone on Mike's dash lit with a call from a number with the owner's area code. He tapped speaker with a knuckle. "You get it done." The owner asked by way of hello. "Enough to guide your crew," Mike said. "Caps and tags retrieved, lines visible where it matters." "You didn't leave caps on the last run?" the owner asked, confused. "My guy just drove out to check and said someone else been putting them back up since this morning. Says the last half mile looks freshly marked all the way to the wash." We looked at each other. Neither of us smiled. I pictured the bright plastic we'd pulled and coiled now standing up out there like we'd never touched them, pointing into the cottonwoods in a new neat line. "We didn't do that," Mike said. There was a short quiet on the line, and then the owner did what a practical man does when he hears something that doesn't fit. He ignored it. "Fine. Survey is out tomorrow. Send me your hours. We're leaving town," Mike said. "We won't be around to answer questions." "Didn't ask you to be," the owner said and hung up. Already living in a different story than the one we were still inside, I put the truck in gear. We pulled onto 191 and headed for the bridge, where the river cuts a green line through the red and the highway makes a promise again. I told myself that leaving is a kind of respect, too. I told myself that if a thing wants you to follow tape into cottonwoods, the strongest thing you can do is say no and make that no stick all the way to the county line. We held that resolve until the sun sat low and the ridge line behind us went the color of old iron and the road shoulder began to show dust tracks that were end ours. Keeping pace just at the edge of view, that's how it started again. Quiet, patient, no tricks, just a pace beside us that didn't burn out. And somewhere between Bluff and Mexican Hat, where the highway goes lonely and the radio finds nothing to argue with. The window dark next to me leaned in with the shape of my name a fourth time, nearly right now, almost like a person hadn't met had practiced it in front of a mirror. I didn't answer. I didn't look. We drove into the shadow of the next bluff and came out the other side still moving. And that had to be enough for that mile of road. Past Mexican Hat, the highway turns into long, honest miles where your thoughts get louder than the tires. The thing pacing us didn't crowd the glass or knock the door. It worked like a shadow does when it knows you're checking the mirror. Kept the same place, at the edge of peripheral vision. Let the center of the lane stay clean. Didn't waste a trick. I don't scare easy, but I respect technique. This was technique. I put the map in my head on the dash. South meant Monument Valley and more empty in the spaces between the lights. East meant Shiprock and a long commit. West would eventually give us 95 and a way out, but a bigger climb between here and there. North on 261 meant the Moydug Way. switchbacks carved out of the face of Cedar Mesa, 3 miles of dirt and gravity, no guardrails, plenty of sky. I wanted sky. Sky meant lines of sight and not much for something to hide behind. We're taking the Dug Way, I said. People die on that road, Mike said, not arguing, just stating a fact. People also live on it, I said. And up top at Me Point we'll have horizon in every direction. Maybe service. He nodded once. We cut right onto 261. The first miles are plain to lane, and then the sign warns you in 3 different ways what's coming. Steep, grades, sharp curves, unpaved. The cliff face shows the road like a ribbon stapled to rock. I downshifted and let the truck feel heavy the way it's supposed to feel. I've climbed it before in daylight with tourists cycling down in bright jerseys. This was late day. Only one other set of lights appeared behind us far back, then turned off toward Valley of the Gods and left us alone with the wind and the drop. Halfway up, the cab pressure returned, not the hush of a motel hallway and not the frog silence from the tank. More like a hand on your shoulder to see what you do with it. The outside air was moving. The dust off our own tires snaked away, but the feeling was inside the truck with us. And I didn't like that because it meant sky and distance weren't a cure, only a stage. I kept eyes on the uphill edge, not the void. You don't stare into the drop on Moki. You treat it like weather. The switchback stacked above us into clean geometry and then lost shape when you got near. In one of the hairpins, a line of small rocks sat across the inner track. 6 or 7 palm-sized pieces placed nose to tail. It wasn't a rock fall. The spacing was too neat. I eased to a stop short of them. Doors locked by habit. Engine still running because I wasn't giving away the one voice in the cab I controlled. We stared at the line. The wind touched the side mirrors and quit. Below us, the desert ran out to the buttes like a map laid naked on a table. I put it in park. We moved them together, I said. Doors open. We don't say names. We stepped out. Gravel under boots, brake lights warming the rock. We kicked the line wide with the sides of our soles and turn our backs to open space. Back in the cab, I put it into drive and cleared the nose through the gap we'd made. I told myself that was just a test of how obedient we were to small instructions. We'd failed the test by not stepping into the pattern it set. I liked failing that test. On the next ramp, the voice came, not at the window, not intimate, carried by the wind from below like someone standing to switchbacks down in the empty air had perfect lungs. It said my name almost right again, no hurry, and then tried Mike's. It wasn't a copy of my cadence this time. It was Mike's voice done back to him from outside like someone had recorded him and was practicing the shapes. I felt him stiffen next to me without moving. Don't let it inside, I said. Can it already be inside? He asked soft. It doesn't get a say, I said, and I kept climbing because the road only goes one way and it's up. At the last big turn, where the switchbacks give you a wide shelf before topping out, the truck hiccuped. Not a full stall, a hiccup, power dropping a half beat. The way fuel-starved engines remind you they're in the math. My eyes went to the gauges out of reflex. Tongue were fine, pressure was fine. The alternator needle was where it should be. The hiccup came again like someone flicked a finger against the fuel line to see if we noticed. I put us on the shelf and stopped with the nose pointed at sky. Parking brake on. Neutral. I didn't shut the engine down. I popped my door and stepped out. Hood release already pulled, because sometimes you say with your body what you're going to do, so the rest of you will follow. The wind up there tastes like the ocean without the water. It came clean across the top of the me and leaned on my shirt. I lifted the hood. Everything was what it was. No chewed lines, no fresh leak. The sound of the engine looked like it sounded steady and not sorry. I closed the hood and turned to get back in. For small pebbles sat on the center of the hood now in a straight row, dry and clean, as if a hand had set them while I was looking away for a breath. I hadn't heard them touch. I didn't reach to knock them off. I didn't hand the moment any more ritual than it already had. From the passenger side, I heard the gentle plastic rattle of a door handle trying once. Quick, the way a friend does when he wants you to hurry up in a parking lot. I walked around the front, the wind flattening my shirt, and saw nothing in the glass but my own reflection and the bright mess of the world behind me. Mike stared straight ahead. He didn't look at me or the handle. He said, "Eyes forward." It asked for my daughter by name. "You didn't give it anything back," I said. I didn't say a thing. He swallowed. It sounded like her, only it didn't. I don't like explaining that sentence to myself. Don't get ready to roll if I tell you. I dropped the hood. The 4 pebbles slid a fraction with a metal thump and then sat like they'd been glued there. I got in, we buckled. I put it in first and let the engine pull us the last 100 yards past the carved sign that says, "You're done with the Doug way." The asphalt came back under the tires like another country's rules. Up on Cedar Mesa, the light tilts different. The junipers sit space like old men. If the world is going to be normal again, it usually chooses here to start. It didn't. We took the spur to Me Point because I wanted the horizon. Out there, the San Juan cuts its tight loops, and the cliffs fall away in steps that make your stomach write new laws. I parked at the last pull-out, not at the edge, back by the low rock windbreak someone stacked a decade ago for their tent. No other vehicles, no voices but ours if we wanted them. The plan was simple: put air between us and the ridge. Ring the truck with what we trusted: light, movement, common sense, and make a run after sundown if we had to, using the dark like cover instead of letting it use us. I hate bad plans dressed up with bravery. This wasn't that. This was pacing the work we had left and refusing to offer the thing inside timing. I set the lantern in the bed again and left it cold for now. We had an hour of light. We walked a slow circle 50 feet out, picking up what the last campers had left. A rusted tent stake, to bottle caps, a flake of church sharp enough to open skin. We tossed the trash in the bed and left the church where it had been. I'm not superstitious about rocks. I just try not to move what's older than my problems. The phone found a bar. 1 bar is enough to text. I type the obvious to a friend who doesn't ask why when I send short sentences at Me Point. Word it out since Butler Wash. If we go quiet tonight, call me at 7 o'clock a.m. If I don't pick up, call Highway Patrol in Blanding and give them this pin. I hit send and the little bubble sat a beat, then left. No reply. I didn't want one. I just wanted the habit of leaving a trail that wasn't made of plastic tape tied at a height. We sat in the cab with the doors open and watched the light even out. The wind kept honest. A raven came up from the cliffs and hung on the updraft like a kite someone forgot to reel in. I liked that again. The normal things kept being normal. That's the last place you check for trouble because you want it so bad. The first odd was small, a new Chiron 5-foot stone style on the low windbreak. Top rock turned at a slight angle like a compass arrow. It hadn't been there when we walked our circle. It pointed at the truck. I don't know who it was for. Us the thing, or whatever rules the thing keeps. But I broke it with the back of my hand and scattered the pieces in a way that didn't look dramatic or ceremonial. Just undone. The second odd wasn't odd at all, if you like coincidences. To hikers' headlamps lit up on the far lip, 300 yards away, bobbing as they picked their steps toward a Subaru hadn't seen pull in. They talked low, got in, started, drove off. Tail lights, red dots that went steady, and then were gone. It helped to see other people leave without anything tugging at their bumper. It didn't help enough. Sundown made the big drop to the river go purple for a minute and then black with edges. I lit the lantern to a low, steady white and closed the doors. We locked them without looking at the buttons. I set the truck in a position I could roll start if the battery chose that hiccup again. Nose just a hair downhill. Enough that neutral would give me a glide to pop the clutch if I had to. You don't get to call this paranoid if you've heard your name correct itself 3 times in one day. We kept our voices factual, We drank water, because men forget. We made a short list out loud of what we do if it happened, and what we refuse to do if we did. We agreed we wouldn't answer the door knock if it came again in any voice. We agreed not to give directions or repeat each other's names. We agreed we'd take 95 west, then 191 north, then find a town with more people than reasons to stay. We didn't say what we'd do if it followed anyway. If it was going to, we were already inside that version of the story. Full dark at me point is where a person relearns the size of things in a way that does end comfort. The horizon lines out so far you can mistake it for a promise. It isn't. It just gives you more room for the thing to move where you can't. The lantern circle turned into our small country and we stayed inside it because a line is a line even when it's made by light. The knock came at 9:41 p.m. I looked at the dash because I wanted to know and because knowing makes the memory later sit in one place. 3 soft knocks on Mike's side. Same rhythm as the motel door. Same skin level sound that says a hand made it, not claws or wood. We didn't move. 5 minutes passed and I heard the tiny scrape of fingernails or something pretending to be. Drawn slowed down the paint from the window seal to the mid-door, then stop. The lantern hissed and held. When the voice came, it didn't bother with my name. It used his again, even closer to true, and then it added a word I hadn't heard it try. Open, not a plea, not a shout. The flat suggestion you use on a dog that knows a command. Mike's jaw worked once. He breathed out slow. I said no, not to the window, but to him, and he nodded because that's who we are. The handle ticked once, returned to place, ticked again, a little impatient now, and then stopped like whatever was out there remembered another trick it wanted to practice later. At 10:06, the engine did its half-stall again. I felt it in the wheel more than heard it. I turned the headlights off one click to save what I could without giving us away as a target of our own fear. The lantern gave enough to keep the glass from turning into a mirror we searched for faces in. At 10:09, the engine quit altogether. No chug, no cough, just a gone sound. The dash stayed live. Battery wasn't dead. Something had decided it wanted to see if we step into the dark to fix what we could see. Neutral, I said. On my count. If it rolls, I'll drop to second and pop it. Count, he said. I killed the lantern to make the stars explode and to give us the drop if we had to move. The night hit the cab like water. The temperature didn't change, just our claim to it. I let the brake go and the truck eased. Gravel crunched. We rolled 3 feet. 6:10. I dropped the shifter into second and let the clutch up. The engine caught first try. That clean bark you get when a machine still wants to be on your side. I turned the lantern back up just enough to own the circle again. I wanted to laugh and didn't. You don't laugh at luck when you still need it. We sat another 40 minutes because pride will get you killed and patience is free. Nothing tried the doors again. No footsteps went around the bed. The pebbles on the hood were gone when I finally checked. A small fact I don't have a drawer for. At 10:53, we picked our run. No heroics. No testing. Just out to 95. Left to 191 north to Blanding. And then we keep driving until fatigue makes more mistakes than staying put would. We pulled away from the edge and back through the junipers. The first mile off me point always looks the same, even when you want it to change. Dust, road, low brush, and the rear view a square of dark or dark. The voice didn't come with us on the speakers or from the bed or out of the vents. I want to say it stayed behind on the lip to watch and practice new words on other people. That's not honest. The honest version is we didn't hear it that mile. That's what I have. That and the print we found on the center of the windshield in the morning. One wide arc of clean in the dust shaped like the front half of a split, hoof dragged an inch downward and away as if something taller than the cab had leaned in at some point in the night and then decided to let us go for reasons that do and belong to us. We weren't at morning yet. We still had the run to the highway and we still had to decide if we were making a stand or making an exit. We chose exit. And when the road to 95 came up like a rule someone else wrote and we slid onto it without missing a beat, I understood something I don't love admitting. Sometimes surviving is just a series of decisions you make not to be interesting. We drove. We didn't stop to see if the cannons had followed. We didn't answer when the night leaned in near Fry Canyon and shaped our names one more time like it was practicing for someone easier. We kept the cab warm and the glass steady and the truck between the lines until the first weak orange showed far east and made me believe we'd stolen 1 hour back. Fry Canyon to Hanksville is the kind of stretch where a person learns what their steering wheel feels like at every position. Long, empty, honest, the trucks hummied me. We'd outlasted the Dugway and Me Point. The plan was simple now. 95 west to 191 north, then a bigger town with mornings that start before trouble wakes up. The sky got that thin pre-dawn band, not enough to see by. Just enough to remind you that the shape of the world is still under there. 5 miles past the Fry Canyon crossing, the right front tire let go. Not a blowout, a sag. Pressure leaving fast like someone had pulled a plug. The truck settled on that corner and started to drift right. I kept it straight, eased speed down, and got us onto a wide gravel turnout that looked like road crews had used it once. I stopped where we could see both ways a long time before headlights would surprise us. The dash tire light took its time to admit what the body already knew. We looked at each other because this was the exact moment we'd been pacing for. No dramatics, just the job. I swung my door open, crouched, and put my palm on the sidewall, warm, soft enough to deform under a thumb. The scar we'd noticed on the bench road had become a slit. No debris in the tread. Nothing stuck, a clean, mean opening to sharp for rock. Unless the rock took a file to itself, it didn't matter. It was flat now. To minute change, I said. No names. Keep eyes out. No talking to anything that talks back. 2 minutes, he said. We practiced this rhythm for years on bad roads. I got the jack under the lower control arm and started cranking. He pulled the spare, loosened lugs while the weight was still down, then lifted the wheel off as soon as the rubber cleared gravel. The air held normal. The horizon stayed empty. My heart made noise like work, not fear. The spare went on. Lugs finger tight, then wrench, star pattern, drop, retorque. 90 seconds, maybe 100. I spun the dead tire to check the inside sidewall. The slit ran clean, like a careful cut from heel to arch, not jagged. I didn't show it to him. He didn't need a picture to go with the fact. We were throwing the jack back in when something moved in the culvert 30 yards off. The dry concrete kind with a square mouth under the turnout and a rusted guardrail above. It wasn't a person standing up or an animal hopping out. It was a change in light inside the culvert, like someone had stepped just far enough toward the mouth for dawn to catch a cheekbone. The sound the air made changed with it. A small pressure adjustment, like opening a fridge and feeling the room shift. I stood without straightening all the way. Mike did the same. It was a reflex from the last 24 hours. Finish the task, own the weight of it, then look. A voice came from the culvert mouth. Not mine this time, not Mike's. It used a tone that would have worked on most people, a border patrol kind of calm. You boys all set, clean pronunciation. No accent you'd spot. If it had asked us for registration and proof of insurance, I would have handed them through the window on muscle memory. We're good, I said. Even a roadside change. Good to hear, it said. And the two words rode wrong on each other, like the speaker had learned the phrase and glued the pieces together. You should check your other front. Look slow. Our gauge says it's fine, I said. I didn't have the gauge out. I didn't have to. I heard Mike shift one shoe on gravel in a way that told me he wanted to stand between me and the culvert and was choosing not to. Copy, the voice said. That was new, a radio word from a mouth and a drain. I watched the darkness inside the square for a shoulder, a sleeve, a hint of movement, the not quite dawn through poor angles. All I got was the feeling that the culvert had depth long enough for a man to stand up right a ways back without crouching. I hadn't seen a culvert like that here. We're rolling, I said. Appreciate the concern. I walked to my door and got in. He did the same. Door locks fell under our thumbs. The truck settled back into itself. I put it in gear and eased us out. The culvert said, "Friendly as you please. Hey, Mike, don't forget the cooler in the bed." And that was the point where names weren't an accident. It wasn't guessing. It had learned the truck, our rhythm, what we carried, and who we were in it. I kept my eyes on the road, and the mirror on the culvert mouth, and in that small glass, the dark shape at the edge didn't resolve into a head or a hat. It resolved into a gap that was in there when we pulled in and was again when we left, like a mouth that preferred to be a mouth. "We're not stopping again," I said. "We're not," he said. We made 3 miles. The spare held. The engine note stayed clean. The dawn got traction. That's when a pickup eased up behind us. No lights. A white work truck with an amber beacon on the roof and a magnetic county square on the door. The kind of sign you can print if you own a printer. It followed without crowding. I sped to 60. It did too. I slowed to 45. So did it. I moved right to let it pass. It held back like a polite driver who doesn't want to spray you with gravel. "Don't brake," Mike said, which I wouldn't have anyway. The truck pulled even with us inch by inch, staying in our blind spot longer than a driver with places to be would. I didn't glance at it full in. I kept the corner of my eye there. When it finally eased forward enough that I could see the passenger window, the glass was up and the cab looked empty. No driver silhouette, no hands on the wheel. It might have been the angle in the early light. It might have been that there wasn't anything seated where I should be. The bed was clean. No toolboxes, no ladder rack, just a white box with a sticker you could peel off and put on something else. It floated ahead another car length and then tucked back in front of us and set a speed we didn't choose. We kept it. I don't care how brave you are. You don't tailgate a blank. A mile later, it slowed and signaled to service pull out that wasn't on the map. I knew that stretch. There's a scenic turnout farther west here. There's nothing but sage and the wind structures that keep snow from drifting. The white truck glided into a gap that didn't exist the last time I'd been out here and stopped with its tailgate toward us. The amber beacon flashed twice without the spinning hardware turning. I kept going. It didn't follow. I checked the mirror until the road crested and lost it. "Next town we fuel. We don't linger," I said. He put the map away. "Monticello's the first honest stop. We can reach it without talking to the morning." We didn't make Monticello before the last trick. It came simple as a stop sign. A construction flagger on 191 north of Blanding where the shoulder drops and the crews set cones when they trim trees. An orange vest, a stop paddle, a white hard hat with scuffs. He held the sign up high and stepped out like a man who trusts the law more than he trusts the people obeying it. Behind him, a skid steer idled with no operator in the seat. Cones ran the lane for 100 yards and then just ended. No crew trucks, no spools of caution tape, no human clutter, just the neat minimum a brain needs to see to accept a story. I stopped 10 feet short of the paddle. Window up, doors locked. He walked over slowly, no swagger, just the I'm at work gait of a person who's got 10 hours of this ahead of him. He leaned down to the passenger window and tapped once the way workers do to ask for a crack of air. I didn't give it. I watched his chin through the glass. It was the wrong kind of clean, like a mannequin that had rolled in dust to pass as a man. He didn't fog the glass when he breathed. Maybe the seal was better than I thought. Maybe he didn't breathe. He lifted the paddle, spun it in his hands, and when it faced us again, both sides said, "Stop." He was trying to be funny, or he didn't know the other side should say slow. He pointed with the edge of the sign toward a spot he wanted us to pull into. There was no spot, just brush and a shallow drainage cut. He made the gesture again like the confusion was ours. The sun cleared a little more of the horizon and lit his ear edges. They didn't look right. Ears have soft curves. These looked notched, like someone had copied the shape from memory and got bored 1 inch from finished. "We're done playing," I said. I put it in gear and rolled forward at 1 meter an hour until the bumper touched the paddle's edge. He didn't step back. He raised his free hand like he meant to press his palm to the hood. The fingers didn't look like fingers anymore. They looked like long, narrow, wrong joints wrapped in skin that had learned the idea of knuckles and hadn't landed it. I kept creeping. The sign bumped, tilted, and slipped from his grip. When it hit the ground, it didn't clatter. It felt like it was made of felt. He leaned in so close to the glass that if he'd been a man, I could have counted pores. He opened his mouth. The shape inside wasn't a tongue. It was too long, pale pieces that ended before the place a throat should be. He tried my name, and it finally came out close enough to be mine. He tried mix and got that right, too. Then he said, not loud at all, "Take me," like a person at a bar closing time who's done asking politely. I don't pretend I know what that meant in its rules. In mine, it meant we were out of minutes to be careful. I turned the wheel into him and rolled the truck over his boot. There was no crunch. There was the sound of weed stems dragging under a skid plate. He didn't fall. He stepped sideways without stepping like he'd been picked and sat down. He rapped his knuckles on the glass. Small, precise, annoyed. The sound went through me. I hit the horn long and hard, a sound that doesn't ask anything back. The long flat noise cracked the quiet open. A ranch dog from a mile off answered once. The figure stepped back like a man who'd remembered an appointment. The holes in the hard hat didn't line up anymore. The vest stripes didn't sit straight. He took 2 backward steps, not smooth, not sure, and then turned and walked into the brush at a speed that didn't match the distance he covered. He was gone by the time I killed the horn. The paddle lay face down, both sides still stop. I drove. We didn't talk for 5 minutes. When we did, it was only to say what we already knew. This wasn't going to tire out or make a big show. It was going to keep setting small tests until we set one of our own. If we kept waiting for it to pick our spots, we would end up on foot answering to a window voice we couldn't outlast. So, we made a plan that wasn't brave or smart, just ours. We picked the ground on purpose. We'd use a place that put rules back in our hands, open, hard-packed, with lines we could hold and a fallback we could reach without guessing. We'd make our own markers and our own timing and leave a thing behind that wasn't a game it had started. That's how we ended up turning off 191 onto a county road east of Blanding that runs straight between 2 fence lines to an old airstrip used now for crop dusters and small charters. Flat asphalt, a wine sock, chain link with a gate you can park in front of without trespassing. No houses against the fence. Enough horizon to see a dog coming for a minute before the dog saw you. We pulled into the gravel apron short of the gate and killed the engine on our terms. We set the lantern in the bed unlit. We took the bright caps and tags we de-hauled all over this country and laid them in a straight line 20 feet out from the truck every 6 feet. 40 markers running parallel to the fence like a runway center line. At the end, we stacked the river stones we kept from the last Chiron in a low cross on the asphalt seam, not because we believed in symbols, but because this whole thing had been a conversation in objects, and we were tired of letting one voice place all of them. We agreed onto rules. 1. We do step past our own line unless a person in a marked normal car pulls in and uses our names the way people do with the history behind it. 2. We leave the second we see the line count change without a hand to do it. Sun edged up. Light flattened the brush. The wine sock moved once and then hung. We waited with the doors open and our feet on the thresholds. 2 magpies found the fence and complained at each other. A Cessna far off made a light sewing machine drone and went the direction of Moab. We listened for footsteps and got only the kind the day makes when it starts. Small clicks in the sheet metal, a smell of warming dust. At 7:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with the reply my friend sent. Late, But good enough. Got your 7 a.m. Check. You good? I texted back. We're okay. Leaving soon. And I let the simple lie stand as a promise I meant to make true. We held until 7:10. Then one of the caps at the far end of our line lifted to in and set itself down 6 into the left. Neat as a chess move. No wind, no bugs, no hand. It was the cleanest sign we were going to get that our rules had been read and signed. We didn't speak to the air. We didn't write a message in stones. We got in, doors shut, locks fell, engine turned, and we rolled out with the marker still on the ground like a receipt. On the way to Monticello, the voice tried one last shape at the window, my name and then his. Accurate now. And then a word that wasn't English, short and hard edge, the kind of syllable you could break a tooth on. It didn't land anywhere in me because it didn't belong to me. I let it pass like a truck in the oncoming lane, big and loud and not mine to carry. We reached town with the sun making shadows where shadows should be. We fueled. We bought a new spare. We used a pay hose to wash dust off the windshield, and that's when we saw it. The single clean arc in the grime from last night pressed at the top center of the glass. To narrow tracks side by side down to where the wiper couldn't reach. Ending just above the hood line. Not a hand, not claws. The shape a cloven front could make if it leaned and slid an inch and then let you go. We didn't pose with it. We didn't take pictures. We wiped the rest of the dust so the arc didn't look like a trophy. Then we pointed north and west toward towns where people mow lawns and forget to bring in the trash cans and wave out of habit. We weren't done with the story, but we'd picked the last chapter's place and pace. The rest would be daylight, and daylight has its own rules, even if it can't fix anything old. We left Monticello northbound because north felt like an answer. Gas in the tank, a new spare ratcheted down, coffee hot enough to burn if my hand slipped. Sun on the hood made the truck look like a truck again instead of a container for mistakes. I kept the speed just under the limit and stacked small good choices. Signals early, lane discipline, no sudden moves as if the highway was grading me and I wanted to pass. The first clean mile came between Monticello and La Salle Junction. Ordinary shoulder, ordinary fence lines, fields that had been cut weeks ago. The cab stayed the size it's supposed to be. No pressure on the windows, no voice shaping itself to fit us. I didn't trust it, and I didn't talk about it. Mike dozed in 10-minute slices, the kind where your jaw slackens and then you catch yourself. Each time he woke, he glanced at the glass, then the side mirror, then the windshield, and only then at me. It wasn't dramatic, it was inventory. South of Moab, we fueled again, even though we didn't need to. Habit. And because I wanted to stand in daylight with people stepping around me, asking for receipts and lottery tickets, the cashier did the morning chatter that belongs to her. How's your day so far? And I told the plain truth. Better now. We didn't linger. We didn't look for meaning in the way the automatic door dragged a second on the bottom track like something heavy had stood there overnight. We just left. North of Crescent Junction, we cut west for Green River, rolled past the melon stands, then up through the blank miles that make a person decide what stories to keep. I kept the important ones short. We didn't answer when our names were called. We didn't follow tape into Cottonwoods. We set our own line at the end. Everything else I filed under not helpful. It's a drawer I've got more of as I get older. Price Garfield turn off. Spanish Fork Canyon with its tidy angles and signs that tell you what's next and are right every time. Traffic thickened and then turned into the normal noise of a state that goes to work on a weekday. That was its own kind of blessing. We were 2 men in a truck with dust on the floor mats and a new spare wearing in the rear, and that single arc on the windshield we de-washed once and then decided not to wash again until we were home. Past Provo. I called the owner because you don't ghost a job. Even when the job tried to ghost you, I told him the line was marked and the caps were in his possession by way of his survey crew, whether he meant to put them there or not. He said his guy had found everything he needed and chalked the neat new rows up to somebody with time on their hands. He asked if we'd seen kids out there, I told him there were prints I could explain in a windmill tank I didn't care to sleep beside again. He laughed like he thought I meant the frogs. He paid the invoice within the hour. On paper, it was the cleanest job we'd had all month. We didn't say Skinwalker to him. I won't ask that word to do work it didn't agree to when we said yes to a fence line. The word says a specific thing to specific people, and I'm not one of them. I used the word to be honest with you because you asked, and because my uncle's rules still have their shape in me. But I don't use it to make a story bigger than its weight. What we dealt with out there. Learned our names, copied our knocks, wore a coyote wrong, and tried to get a hand on a truck door at 40. That's enough without dressing it in something I don't own. We split at the belt route. Mike pointed west for TL in the yard where he keeps his gear. I headed north for home. We shook hands at a red light like we were just changing lanes, because men like us save the long goodbyes for funerals and doors we won't open. He said, "Call me when you've slept." I said, "Text me the second you're in your driveway." He said, "I will." That's what we had. At home, I parked on the curb instead of the driveway, left the truck facing the street, and sat in the cab until the AC in the house cycled, a sound I know through 2 walls and a door. I carried my pack in by the straps and set it down without letting it thump. I showered until the water ran cold, and then I stood there for a count of 30. I don't know who that was for, me, the day, or something, listening for proof I still did normal things the way normal people do. I dried off and put on clean clothes, the kind with were marks at the cuffs, and then I slept in the afternoon because sleep belongs to whoever takes it. I woke to my own door knock, not the same pattern as the motel. My neighbor, 2 houses down, dropping off a misdelivered package with my name on it. I let him hand it to me. He joked about porch pirates. I laughed like people do at that joke, even though both of us hate the whole idea. I set the box on the table and stood in the quiet that comes after a house remembers you. Nothing in it made the wrong sound. I went out to the curb and looked at the windshield arc and told myself I'd dewash the whole truck tomorrow. Not because I believe the mark meant something, because I believe in not letting the day before decide what I do today. The next week, normal kept showing up on time. I ate. I worked. I didn't whistle after dark. Twice, walking out of a grocery store in a hardware store, somebody across the lot said a name loud to a friend, and my shoulders tensed before my brain caught up that it wasn't mine. That faded. That's what nerves do when you feed them decent food and don't test them every hour. For a while, sleep came at odd angles, not nightmares, just pauses. I'd wake at the 13 a.m. because that was the time in the motel when the knock learned my rhythm. I'd lie there listening to the kind of quiet a neighborhood makes when it's doing you a favor. No frogs, no mill, no voice. I didn't answer anybody, even in my head. After a month, my body quit waking me then. People overstate the permanent part of this kind of thing. Bodies want to heal if you let them. I saw Mike twice that first month and a handful of times after. First time was his yard returning a post driver he'd left in my truck bed and didn't want back anymore. He'd replaced it without saying that out loud. We drank coffee outside the shop, concrete warm from the morning. He said his daughter had started waking up asking if the dog needed to go out, and then she'd stand at the backslider with her hand on the glass like she was waiting for someone to knock from the yard. They don't have a dog. He fixed it by moving bedtime earlier and reading until she conked out heavy. Sometimes solutions are that small. Not everything has to be an exorcism. Second time, we met at a diner off the interstate. He looked better. I did too, if I'm honest. We talked about other jobs. We didn't go back south that season. There's a difference between avoiding a place because you're scared and choosing not to give a thing a second try at your expense. We chose the second thing, he said. You think it's tied to land or to us? I said, we left it places that weren't allowed to come home with me. That was enough answer for two men who already knew the rest. One piece of cost I lines right here because it belongs to the story and because I cut it out just to make us look clean. 3 weeks after at my place, I found a small, neat stack of river stones on the back step. 4, not 5, and the top one had a piece of bright plastic pinched under it, not survey tape. Packaging ribbon from the mistled box my neighbor had dropped off, cut square. I didn't open the slider. I stood on the inside and looked for a long time. Then I called Mike and said, "It either came here or a person thought they were hilarious," he said. "Either way, don't step out into the joke." I swept the stones into a dustpan from inside with the long handle and dumped them into the kitchen trash. I took the trash out at noon, not dusk. Nothing knocked that night, nothing since. You can say coincidence if that makes the world sit better for you. I won't argue. I'm not keeping a ledger to convince anybody. I know what I heard, what we saw, and what kept its voice to us wrong enough to stand out. I also know we set terms near that error strip that held. We walked away on our own clock. We didn't give up names or steps we couldn't afford. In my math, that's a win. Here's the line I won't cross again. And you can call it superstition or protocol. It doesn't matter. I won't sleep at stock tanks between Bluff and Blanding. I won't answer if a voice in an empty place uses my name better the second time than the first. I won't follow tape I didn't tie, even if it's the same brand I use. I won't let someone I care about stand at a door after dark when a knock sounds like mine. I won't let a friend work that ridge alone. Not because men are weak alone, but because some parts of the map are just honest about what they ask from you. And the debt comes due faster if you don't split it. If you're looking for one neat ending, there isn't one. The survey got done, the owner paid. The posts stand straighter than they need to in a country that eats straight lines. The windmills still creak because wind does what it wants. Coyotes still test camps because coyotes are good at their jobs. Somewhere down there, a line of bright tape probably flutters in cottonwoods where there isn't a marked trail. I'm not going to check. That's not running, that's respect. A month after I drove south on 191 for a different job and passed the Butler Wash turnoffs without slowing. The ridge looked like it always looks. Sleeping animal back, shadow pulled in its long seams. Light clean on its top. A raven crossed the road ahead of me. 2 wing beats and a slide. I took that as normal, not a sign. Signs are for people who need them. I had rules now and they were quiet. When people ask, I don't tell this one at campfires. I don't say Skinwalker to get the room to lean in. I keep the story here in a place where someone asked for the whole of it in straight words. If you wanted a lesson, I've only got the ones my uncle gave me and one we added on an error strip at dawn. Don't answer when the wrong mouth uses your name. Don't follow what wants you under trees you didn't choose. And if a thing tests you with objects, set your own line and keep it without apology. That last one is the only part I'd call bravery. The rest is just living long enough to know which miles to drive past and which jobs to accept. And when a friend you owe says he needs a hand, make sure the hand you give him knows how to hold a door shut when the knock is perfect.